Welcome to another riveting episode of Beyond the Den. I'm your host, Dio, and today we're diving deep into one of the most talked about partnerships in the Web3 universe. In the spotlight, we have Bry Disanto, a name synonymous with innovation and dedication in the NFT and decentralized gaming world. His journey from mastering Wolf Game to now playing a pivotal role as a marketing and brand lead with InfiniGods, and from last night, a special advisor to Pixel Vault, is nothing short of inspiring. Bry, your passion and commitment have not only resonated with the Wolf Game community, but have also carved a niche in the broader Web3 landscape. It's not every day that we see someone make the transition from a player to a trailblazer, shaping the fabric of the industry. So without further ado, let's unravel the story behind the man who's at the heart of the monumental partnership, Mr. Bry Disanto. How are you, my friend?
Mr. D.O., great to be here. Long-time listener, first-time caller. You're going to make me tear up. That was such a generous introduction. I appreciate you.
Yeah, man, you've been monumental in my journey in Web3, and I followed you since the start of your Web3 career, and just the help that you've had with Wolf Game and the spreadsheets that you've created and the the amazing voice that you've had in the community on Spaces. It's really, really cool. And your level of optimism in the space is contagious. So I just want to tell you that. And you've been a huge inspiration for not only myself, but many others.
Thank you. I mean, it really is a labor of love. People say this all the time, but it truly is about community. I think Web3, when I joined the space, this is like, early 2020, before Top Shot really blew up, this was a whole brave new world of content, technology, projects, ideas, people. So I think, everything you're seeing, that growth is happening in real time. And I think, what's made it so fulfilling and rewarding and fun is the ability to do it with you and everybody in the Wolf Game community, the Pixel Vault community, the BAYC community, the InfiniGods community, wherever you are. But I think to build these companies and projects and IP and games together, we talk about that, in such cliches, but it's true. I've never been a part of something like that in my life. It really takes me back to being like 5 years old, on the schoolyard, trading Pokemon cards or baseball cards. So I'm just riding it out. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I could definitely see us hanging out on the playgrounds. I used to actually wheel and deal pogs. I don't know if you remember those things.
That's before my time, Dio.
Oh, yeah, dude. I'm dating myself at that point. Oh, my goodness. I definitely delve into that story down the road here. But so, the news is out and it's shaking up the whole entire Web3 world. Wolf Game and Pixel Vault are officially merging, partnering up. Can you share some insight into how this partnership came about and what led these two projects to coincide?
First of all, it is such a relief to finally have this news announced out in the wild, because I think it has been simmering for quite some time. You've heard rumors, I think even publicly, from Beanie. He is no stranger to the spotlight, wanting to stir the pot, which I think has worked really well at times. So I don't think this was a surprise, the merger, the joining of Wolf Game and Pixel Vault. But in terms of how long this has been festering, I don't have all the details because I don't know Shep personally, but based on my conversations with Beanie, from what I've heard from the industry, I get the sense that something like this was destined to happen. I think if you look at Wolf Game, and again, this is my perception as a player, a holder, community member, I think if you look at the team's delivery early on, V1 barn game, alpha game, cave game, main game launch, and then the time thereafter, I think there started to be a distinct trend in delivery. Things got a little bit slower. I think the feeling of things getting a little bit more lethargic. And from my perspective, it's the feeling of sort of being a little bit, when you're stretched too thin or burnt out a little bit. I sense that the team might have been a little bit overmatched compared with the community's expectations. I think this space moves a mile a minute. And I think if you've been inside of the world of game development, things take a long fucking time. It takes a while to roll out features. It takes a while to test things. And that's before you even consider things like wagering. The fact that players are putting their hard-earned wool and peak credits on the line. And if the game bugs out, or doesn't work, we're losing, what we hold. And of course, the team has been compensating people for those things, which is great. But that's not costless. It's not like a server is just refunding you and we go on with our days. So I think reading what's been happening, what's been festering, to me, it makes sense. But I would say for the last month, let's call it, I think it's been public behind the scenes, for if you were in the Pixel Vault Discord, if you hold a core, you're on this thing called the core committee, which has been great, but you're under NDA, you can't share anything, you can't trade on any information. And the Wolf Game news was brought to our attention, I would call it about 3 weeks at this time.
Mm-hmm. Really interesting. How hard was it to contain the news?
So hard, man. I'm such a gossiper. Like, I want to tell everybody everything, especially with news that's that exciting. But I have to be honest, I think when I first heard the news, it was shocking. It was a gut check. It was a shot to the heart. It was like, holy fuck, this project that I've been so intimately involved in and feels like family in a lot of ways. The people you've gotten to know, the people you've played games with, the spaces you've gone on, even the conversations and relationship I've had with Shep for the last year plus. You're like, whoa, like they're selling or they're getting acquired. Like, what does this mean? Are they going to blow up the game? Is Shep leaving? Are things going to change? I think you naturally have all of these questions. Change is always hard. But I think, once you really started to learn more about the motivations, the structure, the team in Pixel Vault that's coming in, I think it was really clear that this is coming from a place of strength. This comes from a position of opportunity. I think Web3, especially the gaming sector of Web3, is so ripe for disruption. And I think when you look at a project like Wolf Game, it is pretty small in the grand scheme of things. I think we have about 500 wallets that have played Peak, probably double that have played Valley. Let's call it 1,000 active players at one point or another. It's pretty small. When you start to tie that together and team up with a company like Pixel Vault that has 100 plus million in funding, has run previous sales, has a huge treasury, there is a lot of community overlap. Wolf Game in a lot of ways originated from Pixel Vault, from that Discord, from Beanie. So I think naturally there's a lot of crossover. So I think to have those two communities, those teams, kind of now on the same page, ready and willing to try each other's products, to me, feels like a huge boon and a huge positive.
Talk about a roller coaster of emotions, I'm sure. When you first heard the news, I know you had mentioned that, this is like, oh my goodness, a gut check. What mentally were you like, okay, I've got to get out of Wolf Game. Like, this isn't working. What kind of strengthened your conviction? And when was that turning point for you to say, you know what, this is really good?
It's funny. I never had the reaction to exit. To me, it was not from a place of like fear, I need to get the hell out. And the funny thing is, I don't even think I could if I wanted to, because my wallet is so public at this point. That's a whole nother conversation. But I think my initial reaction was, one, I was shocked. It was like, wow, this is happening. But it quickly became great excitement and enthusiasm. I think I luckily have the benefit of, I was on that core committee for the past, let's call it 6 months. And having worked with Pixel Vault, seeing what they had coming with, now it's public, but with the Supernova, with Reboot, with Battle Plan, and really how they were structuring the ecosystem, thinking about consolidation, thinking about, they have these complex tokens. They have POW, they have punks, 2 different ERC20s. They have all these planets. How do we make things simpler and bring people together? But to their credit, they worked with a community of about 50 of us for the better part of 6 months to present their ideas, share their vision. They came up with an initial idea for allocations. And to be fair, we fucking tore it up. They got a lot of shit. they got a lot of criticism, not just for their initial proposal, but more so, I think, for their previous actions, how Pixelvault had operated. I think some of G-Funk's behavior that has turned some people off. There was sort of this period of reconciliation where there was a lot of blunt honesty. Let's share how we feel. Let's get it all out in the open, and make sure we can move forward from a position of strength. And I think, to their credit, and I have to give immense credit to G-Funk, the Pixelvault team, they took it all in stride with their heads up, owned up to past mistakes, and really committed to, that whole process being very collaborative. It was never combative. It was never like, we're right, you're wrong, it's our way, not yours. It was, no, we're building this thing. We have a team of Giga Chads, really huge brains, but we're building this with you, for you. And I know it's hard to, the trust me bro motto of just telling people that without seeing it. But I think now the fact that you can start to see what PV has been working on, the Reboot white paper is out. It is a behemoth of a document. And incredibly intelligent. You've seen battle plan, you've seen gameplay footage, it exists. It's not some vaporware. I think is a big relief too, because if you hear PV is acquiring or merging with Wolf Game, but you don't know about all of the work and the context behind the scenes, I get where the distrust would come from. So I think it's also a big relief to have that out in the open, because now we can have an honest conversation about, here's what we've seen, here's what's coming, and here's how Wolf Game fits into that picture.
Great answer. Definitely a life lesson, I think, on G-Funk's, side. And there's a lot of pride that goes into being a founder, right? You create this juggernaut of a company that really seemed like it exploded overnight. And it's really hard to not let that get to your head, right? And say, listen, I created this. This is the way that we're going. The whole Napoleon thing, right? But I think that was extremely intelligent of him and his close team to say, listen, we don't have all the right answers. Right. And, obviously you saw that in the reflection of floor prices and whatever, but it was mainly the sentiment within the community. There was some OGs that stuck around. They've lost a lot of members in the Pixelvault community over the year and a half, 2 years. But it was just amazing to say, all right, I'm taking all emotion out of this. Right. And I'm going back to my roots of why I started this. This is Web3. It has to be very different than Web 2. The old school model of Web 2 is I'm the CEO, I'm the founder, and I make the rules, right? So this is completely different. So going to resources that Pixelvault has, the community is buzzing, some positive, some negative, right? There's always going to be that mix of people, but going into the Reboot protocol, I mean, that white paper is insane. If you really take the time to read it and to digest it, this Goose Eggs is a mastermind. Love hearing him speak. The resources, right? I know Pixelvault raised a good amount of VC funding. They should have, they were, what were they? Their secondary sales were like, I think they're top in the Web3 world. So they should have a war chest of capital to, can you speak to a little bit about the resources and how you see that kind of unfolding?
Yeah, I know they raised 100 million in VC funding, at the end of the bull. I believe, obviously they did the Planet sale, they did the comic sales, they have a lot of money in the treasury from that. I believe if you read the transparency report, they have 6969 ETH. Committed specifically to Reboot in the development of games and the protocol, which is a lot of money, and that's not just Battle Plan. That would be Wolf Game. It's any future IP they want to develop. If other games come on the protocol, that would get pulled in there. So it's a lot of money. And I think that's obviously very helpful. But I think more so than the money and the capital, because in earnest and transparently, I don't know if Wolf Game, really had a capital issue. They have a big war chest from sales during the bull market, the land sale, royalties. By all accounts, they've made over $20 million. So I don't think it was a question of them running out of cash. I think it was more Wolf Game, when royalties had died, their revenue dried up and they've been burning, let's call it 50 to 100K a month on development resources, on game growth, on art, all that good stuff. I think more so what Pixel Vault brings, because if you look at Wolf Game, the team is Shepherd. I believe it's 6 or 7 developers, and it's a couple of artists. That is it, which is laughably small for a gaming company. It's fine for an NFT project, but I think Wolf Game is beyond that point. It is a gaming company that is building a gaming platform that has huge aspirations. The team has even said they want hundreds of thousands of players in. So when I look at that, I do not know how a team of about 8 people, let's call it, accomplishes that goal by themselves. So I think it's more so, let's take this mothership, this nucleus, Shep the Gigabrain visionary, this fleet of developers that have clearly done a great job over the last, year and a half. Let's amplify that team. Let's bring in somebody to help lead operations. Let's take, and this is my conjecture, but it's how I'm interpreting it. Let's take Shepherd out of the operational role. He doesn't need to be project managing a team of devs in the day-to-day. Let's put somebody in there who's a pro. His name's Richard. He's been an OG in Pixel Vault since day one. I mean, a true legend in the community, amazing guy, super smart human. Let's put him in, run the dev teams, run operations. Let's pull Shep up a level, focus on the big brain ideas, the architecture. Let's round out the dev team. Let's bring in more support, more resources. Because I think when you look at the team, my estimation is they've been sprinting all in at peak. They want to fix these bugs. They want it to be stable. And then once it's stable, they can open up Slope and Summit, which everybody wants. They can open up more frequent game windows and then beyond. But that's just one small vertical of what Wolf Game is. What about more mini games? What about structures and pelts? What about expanded Valley? I know a lot of people are unhappy with the development of Valley. Frankly, we don't even really have sinks or uses for resources. If you hold a single sheep, you've been collecting resources for 7 months that you have really no core use for. So I think we have a brilliant foundation. There is no questioning that. But we badly need more manpower and resourcing, on the people side to, I think, help grow this faster and help grow it bigger, because the singular focus, I think, becomes very challenging, as you want this thing to blossom and take more users.
Yeah, a lot of power in just having a background and putting the right butts in seats, for lack of better terms. Yep. Right. And Shep being anonymous too, I think that is it's a pro and a con, right? So do you think that played into the decision too? Like, obviously if you want to scale a business, there needs to be some faces behind the scenes.
Totally. In transparency, myself, Za, have spoken to multiple big partners that were interested in working with Wolf Game, and we couldn't even get the Wolf Game team on a call. And we're black box. We have a very small window, to Shep. We have a line of communication, but he gives us very little in the way of what's happening, what's coming. It's more a channel to provide feedback and have light conversation. In terms of deep partnerships, integrations with the game, Wolf Game has always been a black box, and it's been really prohibitive to build any sort of partnerships. I know if you talk to somebody like Seed Phrase or G Money, I think if you look at their communities, investors around them, even my circle, people have had a lot of pause around Wolf Game. They like the product, they like the vision, it's exciting, but the anonymous team is a non-starter. They won't even touch it because of that. So I think, when you now view Pixel Vault, you have this mothership attached to the Wolf Game vision. You have G-Funk, a huge face, but you also have his whole team. You also have, myself, Za, and Term, who are helping as advisors, and you'll have this community council from Wolf Game that's established. You now have, a massive doxed face to go with Wolf Game that can actually, build partnerships. It can operate on Wolf Game's behalf. It can talk to exchanges. We talked to Binance for a while. we couldn't give them any information that they needed to potentially list wool. And I know an exchange listing is Valhalla, for many when you think about the token and you think about Wolf Games growth. So, it's things like that, if you've ever run a traditional business, like that are just bizarre and unconventional, and partners outside of this, very tiny space don't always understand or want to deal with. So, I think that's a big unlock as well immediately.
Yeah, great answer. And going into the burnout phase too, right? If Shep, whoever Shep is, and his devs and artists, they don't necessarily have the business background or the thick skin, right? I think that this space will eat you up and spit you out. So you have to have a lot of balls to be in it. And the more seasoned veterans you surround yourself around, that's literally going to give you the strength to continue to go on.
Totally.
So I know a lot of the Wolf Game community in particular are anxious about the Shep leaving, and what does that do? Because that, you look at the lore and you look at just everything that Wolf Game has created, looking into the vision, what does that do to the vision? I know some are hesitant with, they're trying to wrap their heads around that. Like, where does Pixel Vault fit into that?
Yep.
And, can you kind of expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, I would. If I could drop a GIF in here, it would be the "I'm never fucking leaving" GIF from Wolf of Wall Street with Leo. The context and clarity I can give is, Shep's not leaving, and I want to make that abundantly clear. And Pixel Vault has shared it, Wolf Game has shared it, but of course people question it. Beanie had a thread that came out, I believe, that talks a little bit about it and insinuates some things. From what I understand, and this is my conversations with Shep directly, it's conversations with G-Funk, it's also some context for Beanie. I think all that's happening is Shep is helping with the transition, obviously. I think things with Wolf Game will run status quo for the next foreseeable future. I wouldn't be surprised if the Reboot integration doesn't happen until early 24. I think Pixel Vault has a lot of things to take care of on their side. It's going to take time to figure out how Wolf Game and Reboot marry, and makes everybody happy. The Reboot process took 6+ months to massage allocations and things like that. So I don't envision anything changing with Wolf Game short term. I think it will be Shep leading the team as is with some amplification. The roadmap will be delivered on things like Slope and Summit, more games, pelts, structures, all that. Beyond that, I think you're looking at Shep coming out of the day-to-day role, because if you think about what he's been doing this for almost 2 years, 24/7, with 100 different hats. He is the game visionary and designer. He's running a development team in the day-to-day operations. He's dealing with bug reports. He's dealing with Discord communications. He's running all of their social media channels. He's writing all of their tweets. He's dealing with partnerships, deals. I mean, all of this runs through him, by all accounts. I cannot imagine trying to run a company at a high level with that much baggage and pressure on my shoulders. And that's not even considering the weight and the expectations of running a company in Web3. It is so incredibly hard to make people happy. You're dealing with FUD and negative comments every single day. And it can't be further from what game development traditionally looks like. Most studios build the game behind the scenes, they release it when it's perfect, and then they go to town. Wolf Game's been building in public for 2 years, very publicly. And we've seen that evolution, firsthand, for better or worse. So when I think about Shep, it's really thinking about all of those hats he's been putting on, pull him out of the day-to-day stuff that he doesn't need to be focusing on anyway. And in fact, I think actually might be a detriment to all of us. Take him out, bring him back up to the highest level, and let him be a visionary. Let him think about how this thing becomes special, come up with those big brain ideas, and then work through Pixel Vault and the team that's in place in the day-to-day to implement and execute those things. To me, that is the best of both worlds. I don't care if Shep is running the dev team. Frankly, that might not even be his biggest strength. He's a human being. I know everybody puts him up, at the top of like Rio de Janeiro on a mountain as this idol, but he's a human being. I don't know who he is. He's a very brilliant, special person, but he's a human being who can only do so much. So I think, taking him out of the day-to-day, putting him in a position to thrive, make him the head coach that has the visionary, and then let him work with somebody like Goose Eggs, who, I can't stress enough, is another version of Shep in their own right, and not to, to minimize, who Goose is, but for the Pixelball community, Goose is their Shep. He is this gaming gigabrain with decades of experience, has sold big companies for a lot of money, very publicly, is a very smart guy, has built Reboot, it's in some ways, I think, is akin to the vision that we've had for Wolfchain. That theory that we've thrown around since day one, where Wolfgame was building Wolfchain, in some ways Reboot is Wolfchain. I think it does a lot of the things that we've fantasized about. So when I think about Shep plus Goose plus the rest of the PV mothership plus the Wolfgame community input that by all accounts will be much more visible and much more impactful going forward, I can't help but get excited. It's a much fuller organization. It's a bigger organization. It's a more capable organization. And I think really what it does is it helps us go further faster together. And I know that's a cliche phrase, but I think it's very apt at this point.
Yeah. Very well said. I think it all comes down to the fact that our community, the Pixelval community, Wolfgame, we all need to rally around each other. And I know I love the Shep, and I know many others do too. So we got your back. I couldn't be more excited. I think that, you're really just getting me more and more amped up. And I run a business in real life, so I get that. Feeling like you have a bag over your head and suffocation, like you can't breathe. You can't actually be an artist. You end up hating your life. And I believe that not only happened to Shep, but it also happened to G-Funk and the close team around him, which essentially made them miss deadlines. There was so much pressure from both of the communities, right? And how do you operate under that? So for G-Funk and the Shep to join forces together, I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I do want to get back to Goose Eggs, but before I do, a lot of that, the community has expressed concerns about the leadership and the past performance. And I know G-Funk has been pretty public about addressing those. Like, can you speak a little bit more about how he looks to now get back to his roots and run Pixel Vault?
I'm big on actions, less on talk. And I think this space is a lot of talk. It's a giant house of smoke and mirrors for the most part, and I think when you look at PV and Wolfgame, you're looking at two projects that have arguably delivered more than most, which is a great duo to have. But I think for me, the validation, really comes not from G-Funk's Twitter, his tweets, what he's said. It's more from the core committee. It's observing how they have operated over the last 6+ months, how they have been willing to let people in that, to some extent are outsiders. You could buy a core, get on the committee and have input, and they value that. And to their credit, they've taken that whole process in stride. They have learned, they have ceded control. I think G-Funk has been incredibly smart to surround himself with immense talent from different disciplines, different walks of life, different companies. And to me, those are signs of maturation. It's being agile. It's the ability to learn. It's the ability to suck up your ego, even if you want to, because, whether it's Shep or G-Funk, these guys saw the highest of highs in the bull market. I mean, Wolfgame went to 10 ETH for his sheep. Post Malone was buying sheep. Gary Vee was buying sheep. It was like utter madness. And PV was similar. They minted out the comics. I think Meta Heroes and Mint Passes went to about 10 ETH as well. They had that Planet sale that made $50 or $60 million. I mean, these guys were flying on the top of the world, and then the market crashes and things change, and that has to humble you. But I think rather than both of these founders quit, give up, say, you know what, we've made our money. And by the way, Shep could have run away. He's anonymous. Nobody knows who he is. He made all this money in the bull, has all this money in the treasury. He could have said, fuck this, I'm out. I'm going to leave with the money. He didn't. Same with G-Funk. These are scrappy, motherfuckers. And I'm empathetic to what they're dealing with, what this space demands. And I think what you're seeing here is sort of rebirth, it's inflection, and it's help. Like you said, these guys are human. It is so much weight to carry on that suppresses your artistic ability. And I think to bring in help, to take the weight off of you and the pressure off of you to singularly build this thing and say, you know what, I'm going to have the maturity and foresight to bring in people around me that are really capable and have great ideas and work with my ideas to build something bigger. I think is a really hard leap to take, but I commend them both for doing that. And I've seen it firsthand. G-Funk's done a great job with it so far. He has learned a lot. I firmly believe that, and I think I am very harsh. I was very critical of G-Funk. I was very critical of Pixel Vault. I don't think from the Planet and sort of Adidas era through to effectively the core committee being constructed, I think they made mistake after mistake, with communications, with ego, with bravado, with how they treated holders. But to their credit, I think they've started to turn things around, and I think you're starting to see the fruits of their labor and their work and their love come to light now.
Yeah. Coming from a small business myself, I believe starting is the easiest thing you could do. The hardest is adapting to change, right? And to keeping things going and evolving and hiring the right people, setting your ego aside. I think that that's phenomenal. Going into Goose Eggs, right? I think we need to highlight him. He's really interesting. I want to get him on this show. Would be a blast to really dive into his brain, but his demented brain, which we talked about. He also has a background in blockchain. He's been a OG for, I think, in the crypto space for a pretty long time, and then also a background in the gambling arena. So if you are a DeFi fan, I would be stoked about Goose Eggs.
I mean, if you just put the Wolf Game hat on for a second, I would argue one of the biggest misses, with Valley and Peak has been the lack of degeneracy, the lack of RNG, the lack of what we love from V1, with the stealing and the minting, from Cave Game, with gems. I think we all miss those randomized outcomes. And I understand there is a lot of complexity with the legal landscape, and I'm almost certain that Wolf Game has been super risk averse, and has made design decisions because of the regulatory environment. But I think, we're seeing it come back with Peak, with the style of games. I think with Goose Eggs, with his background, I believe he sold the company to Penn National Gaming for $10+ million. Penn in the news with the Barstool news yesterday. But, I think he has the brain tied into what Shep has, built and envisioned to make Wolf Game a lot more fun. I think we've seen that come back with Peak. But if you look at Valley, itself, it's formulaic. Even breeding, there are no randomized outcomes. There's no chance to upgrade and get an A7 or an A8. There are no rare furs that you can pull. The Valley games are very simple. The looting games are very simple game theory games with player history. It doesn't have that spark of luck and random chance that I think we all want. So when I hear Goose Eggs and his background and his proclivities and what he likes to build, it gives me confidence that we'll start to sway back a little bit towards the Wolf Game, factors that we know and love, which I think is exciting.
Yeah, and think about him partnered up with Shep, freeing Shep of the other ridiculous duties that he's taking care of, and just letting him be as creative and sick and demented as possible. I can't wait, man.
I think you want to let Shep and Goose, these gigabrains, these demented humans in the best possible way, unleash, be crazy, let your ideas out, spend your time and energy on that. And I think the vision and the prospect of those two working together and teaming up on something truly maniacal is pretty damn exciting.
Yeah, dude. I'm stoked. Let's talk about Reboot, the gaming protocol. And so how it's a significant part in the partnership, obviously, right? And really, it's a whole new world for Web3 gaming. Can you shed some light on the opportunities that Reboot presents to our listeners?
I think taking out the technical side of things first, and I'm just thinking about it as a platform, I think it's an immense opportunity. Because if you look at Web3 versus traditional gaming, how do gamers find games? They go to platforms like Steam or the Apple Store to find new things. There's a lot of that consolidation and discovery that's sort of just baked into your habits in the tech. For better or worse, Web3 games can't be on Steam. So we don't have that option. The iOS store, Google Play Store are mobile only. And there are very few mobile games available at this time. So there's this need for platforms, I believe, to bring gamers together to one place to come and find new content, new titles, new games. I think if you look at the world of Web3 gaming, Treasure DAO on Magic, is one example of that. But for the most part, their games are not great. So that's a challenge. Gala, I believe, has some aspects of that. Axie has tried to do that on the Ronin chain, now with CyberKong's coming. But for the most part, I think when you look at Web3, there is immense fragmentation. You have games and ecosystems that are disparate. They don't talk to one another. They don't overlap with their communities. And I think that makes it really challenging for growth, especially when, if you look at the Web3 gaming market, there are probably a couple thousand people that play Web3 games, if that. And most of those people are speculators and investors, not necessarily people that I would deem to be gamers that want to spend hours playing games with no semblance of rewards. So I think with Reboot, what you're starting to see is Pixel Vault is incubating a platform, a place where the best games in Web3, Wolf Game, Battle Plan, and I cannot speak to these, but I know of two other things. There is one other blue chip project company in the space that is talking to PV about putting a game on Reboot. There is also major IP connected to PV that's nostalgic, old school, fantastic game from my childhood that they're talking to about pulling onto Reboot as well. So, if all things go according to plan, you could have 4 flagship killer titles on Reboot, let's call it by next year, that all likely run on GG, the token, in some scenario. And I think when you start to think about audience consolidation and cross-pollination, you have Wolf Games community, you have Pixel Vault's community, you have Game 3, 4, 5, all converging, around this vision of the decentralized arcade. I think that's really, really strong when you think about marketing, you think about player acquisition, because in the space right now, for any game, discoverability and user acquisition are the 2 hardest things for anybody to crack. And unless you have Web 2 integrations, you have ways to obscure the blockchain, or you're very much a Web 2.5 company, it's really hard to pull in users. So I think Reboot positions Wolf Game well to capitalize on that.
Very interesting. And it's going to be on Arbitrum, correct?
Reboot runs an Arbitrum, but they use a tech called Layer 0 that basically translates your assets. So if you're worried about bridging or anything like that, don't. Your wolves, your sheep, your wool, all of your assets, whether it's a Pixel Vault asset or a Wolf Game asset, will stay where they are. But the games themselves will run on ARB. And I believe, if you think about expansion, things like consumables, skins, sort of those low ticket, high supply items, if they release things like that for any games, those might be issued on ARB just from a gas standpoint, which I think has advantages. But your core assets, your core tokens will all stay on L1 ETH.
So for those in our community who might still be processing the news, what would you like to say to them? And how do you feel that they can truly benefit from this partnership?
So I think it's important to say short term, I don't foresee anything changing with Wolf Game. I think all you're going to see is the current roadmap executed on faster. You're going to see Slope and Summit open. You're going to see more frequent game windows, resources integrated into the peak, Wool dashboard, hopefully leaderboards, tournaments, upgraded structures, pelts, all that good stuff that we've known about for the last year that I would deem to be the full loop. I think priority 1 is get the full loop completed and do that as soon as possible. And I think PV helps us get there faster, which is really key. When I think about Wolf Game 2.0, with the Reboot integration, I think what people should know and understand that's really important is PV and the council are not going to change anything without the core community's input. They have no incentive to hurt assets. They have no incentive to hurt wool. If anything, it's how do we integrate with Reboot? How do we potentially use GG in the game in a way that's constructive, not destructive? Because if you think about it from their perspective, what is the point of acquiring a company if you're just going to piss off all their holders? And by the way, a lot of PV holders are also Wolf Game holders. So you kind of cannibalize yourself in a sense if you go that path. So I think what you're going to see is faster delivery of the current roadmap, a very collaborative effort with Shep, important, with Shep at the helm, Pixel Vault, Goose Eggs, G-Funk, their team, and then Keeley, the Wolf Game community. I think we're going to put together this council with people from all different viewpoints, I think with different types of holdings, different perspectives. I think some whales, somebody like Tom, for instance, who I would deem to be a man of the people and speak for the smaller holder. I think that diverse perspective is quite important. And we're going to shape the future of Wolf Game together. And I truly mean that. But to be abundantly clear, wool is the future of Wolf Game. Wolf Game goes as wool goes. It is not going anywhere as the in-game currency of Wolf Game. I think what you might see more likely than not is GG could be integrated in some light way. Maybe it substitutes for peak credits. Maybe it's an alternative. We have to work out what that system would look like, in a way that makes people happy. Because, if you sub out peak credits for GG, well, then animal holders get screwed. So it's a complex, delicate ecosystem. But I'm confident, we'll work through it in a way that's smart. It'll go through many, many rounds, just like Reboot and the allocations did. That took 6 months to get right. So I think that's the future. But I think the community, ultimately will have greater say, greater transparency, and I think greater power, over what happens going forward, which is exciting. It's what we've all wanted. Our voices will be heard. That's what you want ultimately.
And the power of collaboration with both communities. And then also, it truly is decentralized at that point. There isn't one figure that's going, all right, I'm making all the calls, going back to that point. So, and the ability to vote on things, I think is really, really cool. So if you are worried and you have those big bags of wool, or even the Punks token, POW token, right, on the Pixel Vault's end, like, the combination of these two communities, very, very smart people, is, I don't think it's any way you could lose. So going to a controversial view is Beanie, right? So he played a role in bringing the projects together from what I've heard, but were there any challenges or obstacles that needed to, just be overcome, or for the partnership to really be successful? Or
I'm going to do something that Beanie's going to be happy about, and I'll pump Beanie up for a little bit. I'll gas him up. I think Beanie was pivotal in making this happen, and to his credit, he has known Shep, he has known G-Funk, he knows both projects and communities intimately. And I think he was the first to identify that there might be an opportunity, for this collision in this marriage. Beanie knows Shep better than myself or anybody does. I'm sure they have dialogue behind the scenes that might have suggested this was a good potential path that goes back to the burnout points or the overwhelm points. But I think if, Beanie was sensing that on either side, I think to identify that and find a partner in PV, and bring them together, is an amazing, piece of service. So I give Beanie all the credit in the world for brokering that deal, for bringing them together. I know the deal-making process was hard. I know it took a few weeks, especially with PV, preparing for Supernova and Battle Plan and all this stuff. But clearly, they saw value. They saw opportunity in the timing, to put in the effort and the concessions to make it happen. So that's sort of, where I come in. And what I know, but you got to commend Beanie, for this one. I know he likes to stir the pot, he likes to be vocal, and I think sometimes people can't handle his takes. But by all accounts, he's been a really good guy throughout this process. He's done right by both communities, both projects. So my hat tips to him here.
Yeah, and he's definitely a smart dude.
Yeah.
Do you foresee him being part of the team at any point?
No, I think Beanie's role, is one of the past. I think both projects, have had dialogue with him to come out of the limelight, to stop being vocal about what they've been building. I think, based on some past controversy. And you can say that's right or wrong. I understand both sides of the coin there. But I think going forward, it's very much turning over a new leaf. It's a new chapter. It's about PV's leadership. It's about Wolf Games leadership. It's about both communities and that nucleus building these projects together. Beanie, of course, will give his opinion. G-Funk and Shep can listen or not. That's his prerogative. But in terms of involvement, no, that's really where it ends.
Yeah. And speaking of looking into the future, what are you most excited about?
I think for me, it feels like we've been on a beautiful and a fun journey for a while, but also a slow journey. And sometimes this ride is one that I don't want to get off in terms of my investment, but I want to stop putting so much of my sanity, energy, and attention into. I think to have this new chapter, get it into more hands, more capable hands, more visible hands, just to have more of the known out there, to me gives me a lot of confidence and satisfaction. And of course, the mystique, the brand of Wolf Game is not going anywhere. Shepard, the character, is the heartbeat of Wolf Game. The art, the tweet style, the IP, is not going anywhere. If anything, Pixel Vault has been immense with IP development. When you think about comics and storytelling, long have I thought there's a whole world where you can take the Wolf Game characters and build out, shorts, comics, movies, visuals. I think there's a lot you can do with these characters to bring the world to life that, frankly, the team just hasn't had time to spend energy on. And that's where I think, you say more resources, how do they help? It's something as simple as that. Look at what Pudgy Penguins has done with their characters and the ability to commercialize them. PV now has the means and the people to make that happen. So I think it takes this thing that we all love and connect with deeply, and gives it the opportunity to fly. But we'll be there with it.
What impact do you believe that this merger has on the broader NFT space and even the gaming industry from a Web 2 standpoint and Web 3?
Look, it's hopium, I think, to a degree. It's thinking big, but I think this has the potential to go down as a milestone moment in Web3 gaming. If Reboot really does take off as this, next generation decentralized arcade, and Wolf Game is the Genesis game alongside Battle Plan, and they're able to bring on 5, 10, 15, 20 plus high-end games, and it becomes the place to play good Web3 games. Sky's the limit. I mean, you're talking about the place to be in Web3. And even on the InfiniGods side, we've thought about it. We don't have a game right now that's compatible with Reboot, but we certainly, would think about building one that could go on. So it's exciting. I think it has a lot of potential, and you have the right builders attached to it to give it the best shot of really flying.
Cool, dude. I'm going to go into a mystery question here. Put you on the spot, right?
Let's go.
You can handle on the spot. You're
on the
definitely
spot.
good off the cuff. Yeah, for sure.
I'm the best on the
I
spot.
could see you as like a magician.
I'm very clumsy, but in another life.
The clumsy magician. That could be a good bit. All right. So the mystery question is, with the joint forces of Wolf Game and Pixel Vault bridging the gap between Web 3 and also Web 2, right? If you could choose one major Web 2 company and one influential Web 3 company for them to form a dream partnership with, who would they be, and how do you envision this collaboration revolutionizing the gaming and NFT space?
Oof. Web 2 partner for me would have to be Apple or Steam. If you can get one of those platforms hooked into Reboot as your exclusive provider, and that becomes the gateway for Web3 to hit Web2 distribution, I mean, for me, that's fucking enormous. That is what every Web3 company wants. That is the dream. That changes the space radically. Because there are gatekeepers, I think, holding back blockchain gaming. So for me, bust down those walls, and I think we're golden. Web3 gaming, or Web3, what's the ideal partnership for me? Oof, that's a tough one. I think for a company and a game to come on Reboot, I would love to see Forgotten Runes come on. I think those guys are giga chads, big brains, building really cool shit that fits with the ethos of Web3. But if I'm thinking commercially, I'm thinking about big, I'm thinking about benefit to holders, it's got to be Yuga. I mean, if Yuga can blow up alongside PV, Reboot, Wolf Game, that ecosystem, and you create one bigger mothership to lead us into the promised lands, I think we really are stronger together. Bring it on. Bring us together. I'm in.
Sure. We are better together as a space, combating the crazy world, right? Also, I think it's an opportunity for possible sales professionals, right? So if you do have a background in sales, perhaps that is something that PV might be looking for in the future. And hiring from within, I think, is really kind of cool. I know that Pixel Vault obviously started with just a dream, but they did go the route of hiring big, Web 2 consultants, and it just didn't sit well, right? So if you do have a sales background, I think it could be kind of cool, and just pitching the idea of these different gaming companies, Web 2 and Web 3, to join the Reboot protocol. So I think that could be cool.
Totally, and I know even Wolf Game, has hired. I mean, I don't know the names. I can't dox them, but I know they've hired devs from the community on the core team. Obviously Zombie came from the community and was hired. Myself, Term, or advisors. Pixelvault has done that time and time again. So from a career standpoint, if you've ever wanted to work in Web3, whether it's sales or marketing or content or game dev, there's never been a bigger opportunity for you. I think PV has shown that proclivity, so has Wolf Game. And as I think these things start to soar, they'll have the resources to hire more. So I would say, if that's your interest in your future, like, keep going after it. Companies are looking to hire. That goes for InfiniGods too. We're always looking for content creators, marketers, social wizards. There are opportunities.
For sure, and being open to them, and also not going into them with your hand out and being like, hey, I need to get paid right away. I think that this space specifically, allows for many to showcase their skills early on without the, need for compensation. And that will come down the road, I believe. So you've got to put in the work. You've got to prove yourself. And that's something that you've done. Bry, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on, man. You've given some really amazing insights. I believe that you're going to put so many of the community's minds at rest. You definitely did with mine. I wasn't a hard sell. I'm right there with you with 99.9% of your sentiment. So, I appreciate you coming on board and coming on my show, Beyond the Den, and, to have a prominent figure in the space, I think is just really awesome. So I commend you, man, for all your efforts and hard work, and the amount of time and countless hours that you've put into the space that hasn't, not expecting compensation. I believe, you shall reap what you sow. So you've planted your seeds and now you're reaping your harvest. So it's amazing to see, man.
And I appreciate you right back, Dio. I mean, I can echo all of the same about you. I think to see Beyond the Den really flourish, to see you blow up as a voice and already receive, a lot of attention, after I think 6 episodes, is tremendous to see. You are an immense talent. Please keep blowing up, keep doing what you're doing, because you are a voice for good and optimism in this space, which, I think is sorely needed. So much of the space is negative, it's tribalist, it's tear other people down. I think we really need to start a wave of flipping that. It's how do we go further together? How do we lift each other up? Because damn, man, we need more companies that are winning. Otherwise, the space dies. So I commend you. Thank you for having me on. And I'm pumped for all ahead.
Yeah, dude. It's really about embracing the change and just seizing opportunities. And at the end of the day, pushing the boundaries, right, of what's possible. That's all for today's episode of Beyond the Den. I'm your host, Dio, and it's been a pleasure bringing you through this exclusive insight into the Wolf Game and Pixel Vault partnership. Stay tuned for more exciting updates, and remember, in the world of crypto gaming, the only limit is your imagination. Until next time, keep gaming and stay optimistic.